Hi everyone, the next trap is actually a really cool one, and finally we have something for black. So yes, black can also set some chess traps. So let's take a look at the so-called Blackburne Shilling Gambit. I had to consult the exact name. I have never been good at remembering openings names. I still believe it matters more to know the right moves instead of remembering all of those names that exist in the theory of openings. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight d4. Remember when I said that chess traps are often involving moves that are not necessarily the best in particular positions? Well, objectively speaking, knight d4 cannot be considered a good move. It breaks the opening principle of not playing with the same piece twice in a row, or in other words, not playing with the same piece before you develop other pieces. So when you encounter a move like this, what your thinking process should be is that, well, first of all, if you know the trap, then you just follow the moves that you learned and follow the appropriate response. But assuming that you haven't seen a particular trap before, even when you're playing against a lower rated opponent, don't assume that they're just going to make blunders. So a move like knight d4 means that black is just a weak player, so probably, well, surely he just blundered the pawn. And this is the exact approach that might backfire. So knight d4 is a bad move, but tactically there is some justification, meaning that white cannot really safely take on e5. And let's take a look at what happens if he does that, or what could happen. So knight takes e5, queen g5. This is the essence, the point of sacrificing the pawn on e5. As you see at this point, there is a fork on the knight and the pawn on g2, which is quite an important one, because if black manages to jump on g2 with the queen, it might be a bit of a problem for white. In the original Blackburne Shilling Gambit, the main line goes knight takes f7. After all, it looks like a fork. So, well, black is about to lose something, lose some material. Well, on contrary, queen takes g2. Black is not afraid of just entering this sharp line. And in particular, after rook f1, there is a nice cherry on the top. Queen takes e4 check. Bishop e2. The alternative queen e2 just drops a queen after knight takes e2, although it is still surely the better of the two moves. And after bishop e2, knight f3 checkmate. You don't often see such a checkmate in the middle of the board given by black so early. This is why some people might find it attractive. And one line you should probably be ready for if you're playing this with black is that after queen takes g2, well, black could theoretically just play knight takes h8. But this also just loses in a couple of ways at least. One would be just again to take on e4. King f1, queen h1 is checkmate, so bishop e2 the only move. Queen h1 check. Bishop f1, you can go back to e4. Play knight takes c2. Queen c2 is forced, and you win the queen, because if white doesn't take it, and he goes king f1 instead. Yes, after bishop e2, knight c2, if he goes king f1 instead, there's queen h1, checkmate again. So all in all, this also works for black. And and the best possible way for white is just not to enter all of this. So if we just flip the board for a moment, if you encounter a move like that, and again, don't expect your opponents to be weak, to blunder pawns, pieces, to make irrational moves. Some of them might actually know such traps and might try to set those on you. So instead, try, if you're not familiar with a trap, try to, well, first of all, calculate if a move, a certain move works or not, and if you're not entirely sure about that, just opt for something which is normally looking, developing natural move. So here, knight takes d4 is not good for numerous reasons. You can play pretty much anything other than just capturing on e5. So a normal move would be just castling, playing knight c3, playing c3, just to force knight takes f3, queen takes f3. d3 would also be okay. So if you just develop and follow the principles of playing in the opening, you should be safe here. And knight takes e5 is the only move that actually justifies black's strategy. You could also just take on d4 and then castle. Full freedom as long as you don't take on e5. This is the lesson to be remembered, especially that I'm pretty sure that some of you who play the Italian game are going to encounter bishop c4, knight d4 from time to time, especially at club level. When you reach a certain level of strength against, not to mention title players, but expert level, let's say, knight d4, such a move will not likely is not likely going to be played against you, because people are going to understand that, okay, it's a trap, but it's just a waste of time. So knight d4 does not really give black anything unless you take on e5 here. And let's take a look at a couple of examples with some other tactical lines which exist in this Blackburne Shilling Gambit. So I entered the Blackburne Shilling Gambit in my database and tried to find a couple of relatively strong players that fell for it. And I managed to find a couple of experts, so approximately rated around 2000 FIDE rating, 2100. So you could say it's between expert and candidate master level. Also, the strongest player was probably approximately 2300, so FIDE master level. And let's see a game played some years back. I don't really know the names of these. I know the names of these players, but they don't ring a bell. White was approximately 2100. So there was e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight d4, knight takes e5, queen g5, and instead of the knight f7 move, which we briefly analyzed a moment ago, white opted for knight g4. And this looks like a way to deal with all of the problems. The knight covers the pawn on g2. If white is given enough time, he might just actually play knight e3, although at this point I think that d3 is the move that white would love to see on the board, just to accomplish his development. The tactical problem with this is that there is a nice discovered attack here available to black. d5, attacking both the bishop on c4 and the knight on g4, thanks to the fact that this bishop on c8 is uncovered. And the game saw bishop e2, of course knight takes e2, removing the defender of the knight on g4, queen takes e2, bishop takes g4, f3, bishop takes d7, e takes d5, so black is up a piece for 2 pawns, and after queen e7, as far as I understand, black won. So white just he must have resigned here, understanding that it's impossible to play this position without a piece. Of course, it's still far from being obviously winning for black, but yes, black is expected to win this. 2 pawns are not providing white with sufficient compensation. So another line, well, since we are discussing this trap, let's just do this comprehensively and cover all of the tactics available there, so you have a feeling that you understand the tactical points behind particular move orders. So this is one example. As you see, nothing really sophisticated, and let's move on to another one. So this time white was approximately, well, just a little bit 2400, so I was mistaken. He was 2378. Black was the underdog, rated 2036. So much weaker player, and let's see how the game went. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight d4, knight takes e5, queen g5, knight g4 again, d5 again, and this time white played bishop takes d5, so black is up a piece for 2 pawns, with also some advantage in the development, but white played on. And here there was f3. I think that, well, I'm pretty sure it is possible to win more directly here. I'm pretty much certain that some sacrifices like bishop takes f3 or knight takes f3 might actually work, but black just withdrew his bishop to c8, and obviously this is not critical. Any other bishop move would be much better. Bishop e6, bishop d7. I think black was just preoccupied with the thought of protecting all of the pawns that are there, and if he played a bit more aggressively, I think bishop e6 is the calm and precise move. Bishop c8, I think it just makes things longer, and this is pretty much the only reason why this game lasted so long. And let's just say that after bishop c4, knight takes c2, white was really in really bad situation, bad shape, down so much material. He kept on playing, but I think this has nothing to do with the position. He just felt like, well, losing before move 15, 20, 25, or whatever the limit for white was at this day, on this day, was probably not acceptable. So he just kept on playing, insisted on playing despite being down material. But objectively speaking, this is just resignable here. So again, quite a simple example. You just see that knight g4 it just doesn't work. So let's take a look at also some examples that didn't go so well for white. Yes, there are such examples, there are such games. So this time we have white player who is again stronger than black, just a little below 2300, white is 2150. This time different move order, but reaching same position. White was tempted with knight e5, queen g5, and another line that this is actually pretty interesting, because black, in this line, black needs to prove that he is the one who's going to defend precisely. Bishop takes f7, not knight, bishop takes. King e7, so black takes, well, black keeps an eye on both minor pieces at the same time. In fact, king d8 might actually be a bit stronger, but this is some separate analysis. Things are far from being clear. So even in this line, even if white falls for this, there's still some hope for him. Black is trying to attack those two pieces at the same time, and white, I think, opts for the right plan, just trying to take advantage of the fact that the black king is so exposed. Castling, just ignoring that one piece is going to be lost. Bishop g8, rook g8. As you see, yes, black is up a piece for 2 pawns, but at the same time his king on e7 is really badly positioned, and this is what white tried to take advantage of and consider this as sufficient compensation. There was c3, knight c6, d4, queen f6, d5. As you see, pawn avalanche in the center marches against the black king. f4, knight f7, e5. The pawn avalanche doesn't stop. Queen h6 was played. White finally started developing pieces, and let's just take a look at a couple of more moves. I think objectively this is still a little bit better for black, but from practical viewpoint, very difficult to play. Despite being up a piece for 2 pawns, black has very poor piece coordination, and white's presence in the center is really huge. It's difficult to coordinate the pieces well from black's perspective. King d8, knight e4, white centralizes the knight, and black would generally be delighted if d6 worked, but d6 is always well met with e6, and black faces even more problems. Bishop e7 was played, king h1, queen h4, d6. As you see, well, black is not really well prepared for that. He still struggles to develop the rest of the pieces. White has tremendous space advantage. It's nothing really went okay in this game for black, despite the fact that the opponent entered this trap. So even though the gambit seems to be winning a piece, it's far from being clear in some instances. Queen d5, rook e8, bishop e3, and this sets a nice trap. If white was given another move, queen a5, b6, queen takes b6, a takes b6, bishop takes b6, results in a checkmate. So black's king is very vulnerable in this diagonal. Rook e6 was played just to provide the black king with additional rescue square. e8 is available to the king. Rook a to e1. As you see, even though black is enjoying the material advantage, his queen side is completely paralyzed. The bishop on c8 cannot move, the rook on a8 cannot move. So I would actually say white has a decisive advantage right now, even though he's down material. King e8, knight c5, knight d8, black is just moving very passively. f5, bishop e5, threatening checkmate on h2, so h3 sidestepping all of this. Queen g3, bishop g1, bishop takes d6, pawn takes e6. And after some simplifications, black just resigned. I think with such an open king and also some tactics available, black is just losing. Just the easiest is probably going to be king d8, and here queen g8 just wins the rook. But if you want to be a bit more ambitious, I think rook f7 is the move you want to make. And this should result in a checkmate in a moment. So as you see, it was really difficult for black to defend, despite he was up a piece. And let's take a look at one more example, similar one. Again, this game is going to be relatively short, but I think it's good to know that even if you fall for the trap, because for whatever reason you're going to forget about the danger that is behind going knight takes e5, so even if you fall for it, there is still some hope for you. Knight c6, bishop c4, knight d4, knight e5, queen g5, this is our basic position. Bishop takes f7 again, king e7 again, kingside castle, queen takes e5, bishop takes rook g8. We saw this position before. White played c3, and this time black played knight e6. And again, pawn avalanche. If queen takes e4, this should probably be explained. If queen takes e4, white just goes d5, and if the knight moves to any square, let's just say knight f4, because it looks like black is threatening checkmate. After a move like rook e1, well, not after a move like rook e1, after rook e1, in fact the queen cannot move because it's pinned, and at the end of the day black loses the queen and likely the game. So after d4, black couldn't retake the pawn on e4, and instead black just played queen f6. And again, same idea for white. It's very simple, you don't need to be an artist to find that. f4. Those 3 pawns are really dangerous, and then they can be moving in any move order. In all of these moves are really dangerous. King e8, f5, attacking both the knight and the queen in the future? Well, first of all, the knight g5, now the queen. Queen d8, queen g4. I think, in fact, queen h5 was also very powerful. Queen g4, bishop e7, d5. It's a funny picture. You don't often get such pawns with white. d6, e6, obviously shutting this bishop. h6, I don't believe such a move can be played with light squares being so vulnerable. h4 was played first, and after knight h7, queen g6 with queen f7, checkmate. Followed. I'm not sure how strong or weak black was, but definitely not strong enough to understand that this is a bad plan for black, just to allow white to be able to advance so quickly and so easily with the pawns. So, as you see, there is a gambit like that, Blackburne Shilling Gambit. I think there is a couple of ways to refute that. The simplest would be just to ignore it and make a decent developing move. So I'm referring to this position. You could just castle kingside, you could take the knight on d4, then castle kingside, you could play knight c3. There's many moves, provided that you don't take on e5, you should be okay. But even if you do, as you see, black's task is not that easy. Even though black is up a piece, converting is not the real challenge. The real challenge is to survive white's pawn avalanche. So not all that glitters is gold. Even though black manages to win a piece, it's far from being clear, to be honest. But it's good to be aware of such a gambit. Okay, I think something a bit more practical is going to be depicted in the upcoming videos, so please stay tuned.